Yeah, this is part two. I did one with the English language and the German. I'm doing the German language. Y'all seen part two. I mean part one. Y'all seen part one. Excuse me for that. Part one. This is part two of the Indo-European languages. Okay, the German language. I read all that on part one, most of it. I'm at the part where the 1901 orthographic conference ended. German pronunciation. I'll read the media part. The media written works are now almost all produced in standard German, often called the Hochdeutsch Dutch and German, which is understood in all areas where German is spoken. The first dictionary of the Brothers Grimm, the 16 parts of which were issued between 1852 and 18. Okay, got a message coming in, but anyways, and which understood in all areas German spoken. First dictionary, okay, remains most comprehensive guide to the words of German language in 1860. Grammatical and orthographic and rules first appeared in the Dutton Handbook in 1901. This was declared the standard definition of the German official German language. Official revisions of some of these rules were not issued until 1998 and blah blah blah. You know, spelling reform in 96 was promulgated, and government represents all German speaking countries. White, influence in Europe. Let's get to the Proto-Indo-European language. This is a long one. Okay, Proto-Indo-European language, PIE. It's the reconstruction common ancestor of the Indo-European language spoken by the Proto-Indo-Europeans, or the PIEs. The existence of such a language has been accepted by linguistics for over a century, and reconstruction is advanced and detailed. Scholars estimated that PIE may have been spoken as a single language before divergence begins around 3700 BCE, though estimates by the different authorities can vary by more than a millennium. The most popular hypothesis for the origin and spread of the language is the Kurgan hypothesis, which populates an origin in the Pontic Caspian steppe of Eastern Europe and Western Asia. In modern times, the existence of language was first populated in the 18th century by Sir William Jones, who observed the similarities between Sanskrit, Ancient Greek, and Latin. By early 1900s, well-defined descriptions of PIE have been developed. They are still accepted today with some refinements. Pontic Caspian steppe is the vast steep line stretching from the northern shores of the Black Sea in antiquity as far east as the Caspian Sea, from western Ukraine across southern Federal District and the Volga Federal District of Russia to western Kazakhstan, forming part of the larger Eurasian steppe adjacent to the Kosh, or something like that, steppe to the east. It is of the pale Arctic temperate grasslands, savannas, and shrublands. Ecoregion of the temperate grasslands, savannas, and shrublands biome. The area corresponds to the Scythia, or the Scythian people, the Descendants of Chapter, word you want to call the originals, and the Samaritia of classical antiquity. Across several millennia, the steppe was used by numerous tribes of nomadic horsemen, many which went on to conquer lands in the settled regions of Europe and in the western and southern Asia. It was finally brought under control of the synodary of people by the Russian Empire in the 16th to 18th centuries. And this is Dr. Clive Winter's explanation for all the conflict opinions. He was talking about the Indo-Europeans acquired, impossible to determine what language the ancient Europeans spoke. This results from the fact that the so-called Indo-Europeans acquired their culture from African people, but the Indo-European languages are a myth. They say it's a myth now. there probably never was a Proto-Indo-European people. The IE languages are united, the Greek language. Researchers declared there was a Proto-European people because the speakers of these languages share terms. This is a false analogy because the relationship between these languages can be explained by the Greek conquest of many parts of Asia and the Roman Empire. Due to the elite dominance model, many people conquered by the Greeks adopted Greek because it was a language that allowed the conquered people to advance. Romans admit that the Greeks incorporated Greek terms and Latin and transferred these terms to people they conquered. This is why the various languages in Europe and Asia, include in the IE language, share affinities, and they share affinities because the conquered people adopted Greek culture terms so they could progress in a colonial society. When the Europeans arrived in Europe, Africans, they would say, "Co without fear," that's what Africa means, were already settled in the hand. As a result, the poverty-stricken Europeans adopted African terms to describe the new cultural experiences and items they now obtained from African people, they would say. This is why we don't know what language Europeans originally spoke. Dr. Anne Morpurgo Davis has made it clear that less than 47% of the words which have an Indo-European etymology. According to Dr. Davis, 52.2% of the Greek terms in Chantaraine's dictionary, Etymologie de langue Greek, 1968, have an unknown etymology. The mixed nature of the Greek language results from the early settlement of the Aegean by blacks from, they say, Africa or so-called Middle East, even though that's part of the Suez Canal. You know, that's a whole nother topic. But you know, that's what it says right here. This is good information. Some of these words are of African origin. Robert K.G. Temple in The Serious Mystery shows that many of the most common words of the Greek vocabulary are of an Egyptian origin, they say. Diop, 1991, has also discussed the Egyptian origin for many Greek terms. This is why the Niger-Congo language are at the base of IE languages. In his study, compared to linguistics of Indo-European and Niger-Congo, or G.J.K. Cabell, Dunn has this to say. The original African migration of hunter-gatherers into Europe took place in the Paleolithic period, and earlier about 6,000 BC, or Paleolithic, or on foot from Asia, with them farming and livestock. Then about 3,000 BCE, and they say about 6,000 BCE, or the early immigrants that start arriving. That's what they say. But Indo-European languages were introduced, and with them the horse and the wheel, but the speakers of these did not differ genetically. The earlier mixed Asian immigrants, their change of language was like change of clothes, so to speak, relatively superficial. The results was the modern genetic constitution of Europe, 30%, Africa 65%, mixed Mediterranean or Afro-Asian, they said, but this is in accord to genetic evidence which testifies the unity of the Mediterranean peoples and does not recognize a separate Indo-European stock. Arnez Vlanina Gomes or Casado or Martinez Lasso in 2002 stated clearly that there's no genetic trace of an Aryan migration, that if it occurred, it must have been a domination by a small elite. Asia Minor, before the coming of the Afro-Asiatic farmers, was also colonized by African peoples, as Reniko Rashid, he said it in his videos. Yeah, he talks about that stuff. I heard of him before. He's a okay scholar. 1993 has argued in recent publication by Karnak Houses, but the survival and the antiquity of the Niger-Congo languages, or Limnos, which was closely related to Etruscans, they would say, but I say Etruscans. That's what someone said, Etruscans. That's the proper way to say it, but they call it Etruscans, most people say, is proof of this. In the Myonian Crete, as we now know, Campbell Dunn in Myonia linear scripts, the Niger-Congo context was African Niger-Congo, and non-Indo-European language was still spoken at Prasios on Crete in 14th century BCE. Standard 1948, and probably chapter 2, page 322, I believe. But the shores of the Aegean Mediterranean, therefore, were originally occupied Africans and subsequently overlaid by Afro-Asiatic farmers. It follows that the Mediterranean, once in the remote past, home of the African blacks. No doubt this is the reason that the Mediterranean peoples are olive-skinned and blend of Afro-Asiatics and of black Africans from closer to the equator. But this is not a linguistic question, and it raised controversial issues outside the ambit of our inquiry, so we will not pursue it further. Dr. Clive Winters again. Since modern European languages, the so-called Indo-European, are derived from the Indian language of the Dravidians, plus the East Asian language of people like the Persians, plus whatever the Aryans and other white Central Asians spoke, plus languages of the native black Europeans that they meld with. Point being, the modern languages are modern combinations of ancient language, but the English language is a perfect example. Therefore, a case can be made for just about any connection, but the relationship between the English and ancient languages is mainly due to literacy, not the combination of ancient and modern languages, but the speakers of the Germanic languages, which include English, the lexicalize many Greek and Roman terms as they can literate in these languages. Blacks spread civilization around the world. As other people came into contact with these blacks, they adopted culture, traditions, and the terms that came along with the new way of life introduced to the Europeans by the blacks. This is evident in the relationship between Greek and the two major lingua francas of Central Asia and South Asia, known as Toxranian, something like that, Tocharian, or Sanskrit. It is important to remember that the relationship between the Indo-European and Indo-Aryan language, especially Sanskrit, is a via of the Greek language, but the Greek influenced other European languages because it was recognized as a language of culture and civilization by the Romans. Red people, by the way, red men. It was in Pakistan that Greek language was probably incorporated in Sanskrit. Many of the rules for Sanskrit were codified by Pani, who was born in Salatrucha in northwest Pakistan. Pani's grammar contains 4,000 rules. When Pani wrote his grammar of Sanskrit, it was spoken by the elites in the area. Greek was also popular when Pani worked in the Sanskrit grammar. The Greeks were called Yunani or Yavana. Thus, we learn from Agarwala, 1953, that the Yavani Lapapi edict was well known in Gandhara or something like that. Gandhara or Ra, whatever you want to pronounce that right. And even Pani mentions the Yavana in his grammar. The term Yuna meant Ionia. Woodcock, 1966. The history of the Greeks in the area is quite interesting. When Alexander entered the Hindu-Kush region in 327 BCE, the Greek settlements were already in the area. By 108 BCE, as the Mauryas fell into decline, the Greek kings of Bactria took control of the western Punjabi and Gandhara, or that's how you say it, Gandhara, I believe, Gandhara, up to the Indus River under King Mandar. I think it says under King Mandander or something like that. In 130 BCE, the Greeks had their capital at Taxila. The center of the Greek culture in the area was Karasada near Peshawar, and that's in Woodcock's book in 1966. I think that's in there. He mentioned that. That's what this guy's referencing. But this is interesting about the language. But many Greek terms were probably already incorporated Okay. This is interesting. Yeah, this is about the languages, and this is interesting. I stumbled upon this, and I kind of read some of most of it from yesterday and the day before. Probably that Saturday and that Sunday on Mother's Day. I mean, it's some interesting stuff right here about this language. I mean, I've been tripping off this for a while. I've been meant to make a video of this, but I've been studying, been, you know, keeping my mind sharp and whatever. But given the popularity of the Greek in the region, it is not surprising that the Sanskrit would show such a strong relationship to the Indic languages, since it was spoken throughout the area of a couple of hundred years. Commenting on the Greek rulers of India, Kulk or Rothman in 1998, that's a reference to him. So say they are referred to as Indo-Greeks. That's what this guy is saying. This is some good information. And yeah, this is what he's trying to explain, that Greeks at that time, the language is expanding, you know, the mixing and, you know, the tribes and all the other stuff. It's real interesting. Real interesting what I just read. And you can hear what part one I said, you know, it goes into that, and it talks about the Indo-European language. This is just a summary I'm reading. This guy wrote. Might have to explain a few steps that came, but this is Proto-Indo-European language. I think I read that. Hope I didn't lost my place. I think I lost my place for a minute. Read about the Hindu Kush by Alexander. Many Greek terms will probably already incorporate Pakrits, Northern Karashita, and Brahmi, Greek inscriptions. Okay, many Greek terms probably. Yeah, I read that. And the night. Okay, Rothman. That's right. I'm right here. Said that they are referred to as Indo-Greeks. There were about 40 such kings and rulers who controlled large areas of the northwestern India and Afghanistan. They have appeared as Yavanas in the stray reference in India literature, and there are a few but important references in the European sources. In these distant outposts, the representatives of the Hellenic policy survived the defeat of the Western compatriots at the hands of Parthians for more than a century. That's on page 70 if you read his book. What's his name? Kulk and Rothamud in 98. You can get that book. It's out there. The greatest of the Indo-Greek rulers was Menander, or something like that. Menander, who is mentioned in the famous Milalindov Panapho, or something like that text. The Shakas adopt many elements of the Indo-Greek culture, which they perpetuated in India for over 100 years. Rahman, 2004. Reference to him. It is impossible to argue for the genetic relationship between the Vedic and Greek language based on the fact that speakers of these languages formerly lived in an intimate contact in historical times. Secondly, we know the Dravidians were in Greece before the Indo-Europeans entered the country. That's true. The Dravidians were already there. They were the descendants of Japhet. Most people teach. One of the Hebrew Israelite groups teach, I think it was GMS at the time. They are correct, because people are arguing about the research. That's one reason why I got stamped on my old channel. I was teaching that, and I was saying the Dravidians are the descendants of Japhet. They are more dark. They're not really Asiatic. They're a different breed stock. They're like Aboriginal, but they're dark. But they are the Dravidians, by the way. They're darker than I am, and they mixed in with a lot of people, by the way, the Dravidians. But were in Greece before the Indo-Europeans and entered the country. But these non-IE speakers were called Pelasgians. I think I mentioned that in one of my videos. Pelasgians, the Mediterranean history, and the ancient Yaphites. I mentioned in one of those videos, and Hoplites and all that. I mentioned one of those. As a result of Morpurgo Davis, the linguistic evidence, is there any in Gerald-Cadogan, the end of the early Bronze Age in the Aegean? And it's on page 93 and 123 in their books. But it says that only 40% of Greek is of Indo-European etymology. By page 105, you can read in their books the end of the early Bronze Age. It says only 40% Greek terms are of IE origin. Many of the Greek terms that agree with the Indic languages may be from the 60% of the Greek lexical items that came from non-IE speakers, which, as noted by Lavari in Dravidian Origins, and the West were people who spoke either Dravidian languages or other languages from Africa, they would say, or Akibulan, that's what I call it, or Ethiopia, where you want to call it, genetically related to the Dravidian group. The conclusion, as a result of the Greek influence in Bactria and India, Pakistan, Indians and Bactrians had to acquire Greek culture to enhance their position to opportunity in North India, Bactria, during the Greek rule. But the Greek placed prestige on statements, elements introduced into the region by the Greeks, especially the Greek language status acquired by the Bactrians and Indian Pakistanis, was thus centered on the acquisition of Greek language and Greek culture. This is supported by the evidence that Indian elites used Greek in business and government. Rockman, 2004. This would have in turn added pressure on the Bactrians to incorporate Greek terms into a Bactrian lingua franca, something like that. Takaran. Given the fact that the Greek administrators in Bactria and northern India, Pakistan refused to fully integrate it to the Bactrians and the Indians into ruling the elite, unless they were well versed in Greek culture and language, led to subsequent generations of native Bactrians and Indian Pakistanis to progressively incorporate more Greek terms into their native language. This would explain why Bactrian has many features that relate to certain IE etymologies, and Pani's Sanskrit grammar present many terms that are associated with the Greeks, but illustrates literally affinity to Indo-Iranian languages, which are geographically, temporarily close to the Tocharian. Some researchers might dispute the influence of the Greek language on the Sanskrit because Pani's grammar was supposed to have been written around 400 BCE. That's what this says right here. This for the grammar might to be early, because Rockman 2004, Akawala 1953, that's his book, maintains that Greek was spoken into Gandhara in Pani's time. The influence of colonial Greeks in Central Asia would explain why the most important evidence of an IE relationship with Sanskrit, the historical connection between the so-called Indo-European language, probably respected in a real linguistic relationship, not genetically relationship. Here I discuss in detail a relationship between Greek and Sanskrit. See pages 70 and 72. I ain't gonna get into that. But the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire, or Byzantium, was the Roman Empire during the late antiquity. That's the other empire. There's two empires. The Western Empire was the white one. They try to say this one is the Moorish right here. So that's for where I've studied. Late antiquity in the Middle Ages, center of the capital of Constantinople. The state is also referred to as the Eastern Roman Empire, and primarily in context of the late antiquity, and especially while the Western Roman Empire was still maintained in Italy. Now the Western Roman Empire was in Italy. That's a nation state. That was a nation state. There was a brother named Master something. That was a nation state. But the Eastern Roman Empire, the Bavarians, were actually Moors, dark-skinned Moors that ruled the Byzantine Empire. I studied this, and you can check this for yourself, and I'm going to do a whole topic on that another time about the Byzantine Empire, you know. And that's a long topic, you know, and I'm not going to get into that further, but, you know, that's a long topic. But, you know, the West was still mainland Italy, but both Byzantine Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire are historiographical terms applied in later centuries. Throughout its existence, the state was known simply as the Roman Empire, was the direct continuum of the Roman state. The Roman state in Western Rome, or Greco-Roman Empire, it was a nation state of white people that dominated trade, and they destroyed the original Catholics. The Moors, by the way, they were black, were dark skinned, or whatever you want to call them. It was a war between the two. For my studies, I've studied, not these lies that they put out on the internet, but you know, or other misinterpretations of the information. Apply later since throughout existence, later in the Roman Empire, constant continuation of Roman state, maintain Roman state traditions, they would say, the Greco-Roman traditions. Byzantium is today distinguished from ancient Rome proper insofar as it was originated towards Greek culture, they would say, or characterized by Orthodox Christianity rather than Roman polytheism. Roman polytheism or Catholicism, they would say. Same thing. They have that little ways too, but was predominantly Greek speaking rather than Latin speaking. Now, Latin speaking is Western Rome. They started that nonsense and then they destroyed it. It didn't come first. The Greek came before the Latin. There were two different languages. And here's modern Greece. I'm going to get into that. This is a touchy one. I done did the Byzantine Empire. That's a brief. I'll do another whole topic on the Byzantine Empire in the future. I don't know when. Modern Greece. Most Greece gradually became a part of the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century. The Byzantine Empire, the successor to the ancient Roman Empire, who ruled most of the Greek-speaking world for over 1100 years, have been fatally weakened since the sacking of Constantinople by the Latin Crusaders in 1204. The Ottoman advance into the Greece was preceded by a victory over the Serbs to its north. First, the Ottomans won at 1371 CE in this timeline on the Martarisa River, where the Serb forces were led by the King Volskin or Mršaković or something like that, the father of the Prince Marko, and the co-ruler of the last emperor from the Serbian Nemljic dynasty. But this was followed by another Ottoman victory in the 1389 CE. Battle of Kosovo. With no further threat by the Serbs, that's Yugoslavia, by the way, Kosovo, in those areas, Eastern Europe. Clinton messed up that war, you know, and he was wrong for going there, just like they did in World War I and in this century and the last centuries ago. I remember that when I was young, but that's a whole nother topic. But let's continue on. Subsequent to the Byzantine civil wars, the Ottomans captured the Constantinople in 1453 and advanced southwards into the Greece, capturing Athens in 1458. The Greeks held out in the Peloponnese until 1460, and the Venetians, I believe, the Venetians or Genoese or something like that, Genoese clung to some of the islands, but by 1500 most of the plains and islands of Greece were in Ottoman hands. The mountains of Greece were largely untouched and were refuge for the Greeks to flee region ruled and engage in guerrilla warfare. Cyprus fell in 1571 and the Venetians retained Crete until 1670. The Ionian Islands were only briefly ruled by the Ottomans. The Kefalani from 1479 to 1481 and from 1485 to 1500s remained primarily under the rule of Venice. In 1821, the Greeks rose up against the Ottoman Empire and followed a protracted struggle with the autonomy of the Greece was first recognized by great powers, United Kingdom, France, and Russia in 1828, 19th century, that will say. Who are the modern Greeks? Here's a book that is going to explain. From the little book of Big Greek Lies, it would say. Big Greek Lie number 1 by Risto Stefov. That's in April 25 that he published it. You can go get that book, or you can find your local bookstore. But modern Greeks are direct descendants of ancient Greeks. The greatest victims of Greek lies are the Greeks themselves. Note, our apologies to the Greek people if they find these articles offensive. Our objective here is not to create tension between the Macedonian and Greek people, but rather to highlight the problem that exists with the Greek state and its institutions. As long as the Greek state denies our existence as Macedonians with rights and privileges, we will continue to publish these types of articles. How can a region in the Balkans where modern Greece is located today, which has been open to a multitude of invasions and conquest settlements, remain homogeneous and untouched for 2,700 years? Ironically, as the Greek claim, how can a modern Macedonia region neighboring modern Greece be so heterogeneous that it has completely lost its original identity? These are questions that every Greek should be asking. Ever since Philip II of Macedonia conquered the ancient city-states at the conclusion of the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE. The region south Olympus has been without borders and open to all kinds of invasions of barbarian settlements. The big Greek lie. Modern Greeks are direct descendants of ancient Greeks. There were no ancient Greeks, since the word Greek was not coined until after the Roman conquest, approximately 600 years after the establishment of the city-states, approximately 150 years after they were conquered by the Macedonians. It was also well known that the ancient cities were never united politically and never established themselves as a single state. In fact, they exist politically independent from one another and fought each other for economic dominance of the region. The name Greece was imposed on the modern Greek kingdom by the great powers of Britain, France, and Russia. That's fact. Modern Greeks call themselves Hellenes or Ellenes, and their state Hellas or Ellis, by using the name Greek to refer both the ancient and modern people. The Greek state falsely implies descends from modern Greeks from the ancients by using the name Greece to refer to both the ancient and modern states. The Greek state is falsely implying continue between the ancient city-states and modern Greece. And here's number 2. There was some sort of political unity between the ancient city-states themselves, where one did not exist. In reality, the words Greece and Greek were polarized by modern 19th century writers. There are no ancient maps or reference with the words Greece. The Romans may have made some reference to the ancient people living in Sicily as Grecos. That's why we say Greco-Romans. But they refer to the region of South Olympus as Arcadia. Arcadia, they would say. During the Ottoman era, the people living south of Olympus called themselves Romos or Romans, red men. Greece is a newly created state which never existed before the 19th century. The kingdom of Greece, occupying the region of Mora, present-day Peloponnesus, was created for the first time in 1828. Between 1829 and 1912, the Greeks enlarged their territory to present-day Greece by conquering Epirus, Thessaly, and the 50% of Macedonia. As the inception of Greece stated out with small population less than 1 million people, most of whom were Albanians, Slavs, and Vlachs, with small minority of other ethnicities. By the time Greece conquered Epirus and Thessaly, its population grew to 3 times its original size. In 1907, it registered a population of 2,600,000. After it conquered Macedonia, exchanged population with Turkey, its population tripled. In 1928, Greece registered 1,200,000 people. 1,100,000 of them were Christians, refugees from Asia Minor. After the Treaty of Lausanne in July 1923, after the population exchange with Turkey, Greece declared itself homogeneous or something like that, homogeneous, or they say hetero-homogeneous, and you know what that means, consisted of 100% pure Greeks with a very small Muslim but ethnically Greek population. It is the estimate that after Macedonia was conquered, occupied, and had some of its population evicted, more than 1 million Macedonians still remained and were included among the Greeks. According to Greece, however, there were no non-Greeks left in Macedonia. After its population exchange, also according to Greece, the ancient Macedonians were extinct, killed off by the Slavs. Around the 6th century CE, during the so-called Slav invasion. So the question that begs to be asked here is, what nationality were these million or so people who remained in Macedonia and became part of Greece? Many Greeks will argue that they were Bulgarians. If that were the case, then how can the modern Greeks claim purity and homogeneity if at least 16% of its population, 1928, was non-Greek? But what about its Vlav and Slav, Albanian, and Turkish elements? Clearly they are not Greeks, but let alone being direct descendants of the ancient Greeks. Even this small argument shows that there is something fishy about these Greeks' claims. For over a century, half of the Greek state institution, organization, and individuals have been making unproven and unfounded allegations that the modern Greeks are direct descendants of the ancients. To this day, they have shown no evidence to prove their claims. In fact, the opposite is true. There is ample evidence that proves that the particular modern Greek claim is an outright big Greek lie. Yeah, that's interesting. And he's saying that's a lie they claim today. I mean, that's gone on long. It's a long part too, so you know I have to tackle it. But this is exactly what's tackled by historian John Shee in chapter 4 of The Great Ethnic Mix of Greece, pages 77 to 96. Get that book. In his book, Macedonia and Greece and the Struggle to Find a New Balkan Nation. Among other things, John Shee proves that even the ancient people were not homogeneous. It has been estimated that the classical times, the number of slaves in Attica was roughly equal to the number of the free inhabitants, or around 100,000. In Sparta, there was an even greater proportion of slaves. Most of them, the Helots, were Maecenas, while the slaves of Athens were a wide racial mix, and therefore less likely to unite on the basis of common language. These Messenian Helots of Sparta all spoke Greek and had a kind of a group self-conscious. Thus they presented special problems of security for their Spartan masters, for whose numbers were constantly on the decline. Changes in the ethnic composition of the Greek city-states are illustrated by the comments about the case of Phiso, who have been the recipient of an unhelpful decision by a vote of the Athenian city assembly, made a violent speech which he said that the latter-day Athenians had no right to identify themselves with the great Athenians, latter-day Athenians, and the Athenians of the days of Pericles, Demosthenes, Aeschylus, and Plato. The ancient Athenians had been extirpated by repeat wars, massacres, and they were mere mongrels, degenerates, and the descendants of slaves. He said that any Roman who flattered them as if they were legitimate heirs of those ancient heroes was lowering the dignity of the Roman name. Such as historical ideas makes it clear that even to 1,000 years ago, the notions of ethnic purity amongst Greeks was difficult to sustain. The ethnic mix will continue over the next 1,000 thousand years, as Nico can observe, ancient Greece were, after all, a very mixed ancestry, and there can be no doubt that the Byzantine Greeks, both before and after the Slav occupation, were even more heterogeneous. And pages 83 and 84 on John Sheets, Macedonia and Greece, the struggle to find a new Balkan nation. And there you have it. The truth: modern Greeks are not only not direct descendants, but their Greekness is a myth. Modern 19th century creation. And this is what happens when you lie, and they've been exposed. This